This is my developmental interview assignment. Today I'll be interviewing my mom. Her name will remain anonymous for this assignment. But here we go. I'm going to first ask her the universal questions of adulthood because that's what stage of life she's currently in. And then we'll go into cognitive, biosocial, and psychosocial questions a little bit more in depth. Okay. So, first of all, you're in the adult stage of life according to the textbook because that is age 25 to age 65.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you in that range?
I'm about right in the middle.
Okay.
Right in the middle, 3/4.
Okay, sounds good. And what does your life look like right now? Like how many kids do you have? How many parents? Living situation, just a very short synopsis.
I am in what is called the sandwich generation. So I have a living parent that's aging, elderly, and I still have adult children at home and grandchildren. So I'm right in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm. New grandchild.
New grandchild. First grandbaby.
Okay, awesome. So the universal questions are provided from the assignment, and then the other ones are more questions I chose to ask. But for the universal questions, what is the impact of your culture, gender, and age on your current stage of life?
Okay, so I'm going to break that into 3. So culture, gender, and age, right? Culture. The culture impact, typically, I was a stay-at-home mom, reared my children, and a lot of times there was external pressure to work, have an outside job. And so I just chose carefully who I surrounded myself with so that I could remain positive in doing that. Culturally, I think that's about it. Gender, I think that over the last 30 years, the female population, and that's what I am going to refer to because I'm a woman, has become more supportive of each other regardless of their role. If they're choosing or have to work outside of the home or staying home as a housewife and raising their children, I think that women in general have become more supportive of one another, and that is exponential really because that's who we relate to most easily. Culture, gender, age.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the original question?
What is the impact of your age in your stage of life?
So I've noticed since about age 30, I'm 54 now, from starting about age 30, my body is just starting to decline. It's harder to do things. It's harder to stay up late. It's harder to walk 5 miles. So I think, we still have the same family commitments and things that we want to do and have to do, but it's getting harder for our bodies to do those things easily. So it takes a lot more effort.
Nice, good answers. Okay, next question. Discuss some of the pros and cons of being this age. So you could, narrow it down more to being in your 50s, or you can kind of broaden it to being in the adulthood stage of life.
So adulthood, when you're a young adult, you kind of have your whole life in front of you. And I would say that between 20, 25, so early adulthood, and 35, maybe even up to 40, is really the most difficult time in a person's life because you are um, finishing, you're out of high school and now you have responsibilities. You're maybe or maybe not doing continuing education, so college. If not, then you're going into the workforce and you're starting to establish your retirement, your work identity, you're earning money, trying to support yourself, a family, starting a family, growing a family. There is the most pressure on a person, I think, during that time of life. And then you get, you're raising your children and your children become adults. And then you kind of have your freedom back again. You kind of are rediscovering, oh, here I am. So you kind of see yourself as an adult, but yet you have life experience now. And you say to yourself, I see what's important. I'm going to do away with the clutter of life. Like, there are non-essential things really that you have to do that are less important, that used to seem important, but now you're going to say, oh, I only have this much time. If you look at a person's lifespan, you realize you're getting closer to the end of your life and you want to do some fun and memorable things with your spouse, your family. So, friends also would be included in that, but probably more so those closest to you. So you kind of reevaluate your life, where you've been and then where you want to go. And so.
Nice, good answer. All right. What are some of your fondest memories, and how did they shape the person you are today in positive or negative ways?
Oh, some of my most memorable. My parents took us to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and I think that was all I knew for friends and activities. And the church that we belonged to was small, and so it was really more like family, since most of our family was in another state. So I have lifelong friends from that group. We did all kinds of things. We did barbecues, camping, picnic, you name it. So I have a lot of fun childhood memories from that. Road trips, just being together with my family, my parents. And then as I entered high school, school activities were always really fun. Sporting events and weekend things. We would, at that time it was a little safer to just go to the mall and watch a movie. So that's something that we would do. A lot of times I had this one friend, we lived about 20 blocks away from each other, and we would ride bikes to each other's house. And then we would just ride bikes all afternoon. It seems crazy, but we would just ride our bikes for hours around our neighborhood and to the park. And so I think those are a lot of my favorite childhood memories. And then as a married family, every summer we would go camping and gold mining, and I think that was a really fond memory overall. Just being together and not having any other responsibilities, but to just enjoy nature and family time and relax. And then now, a little bit later, adulthood, I would say the same. I just love being with my family, regardless if it's watching a movie or a shopping trip to Costco or or a fun camping trip. It's just being together. So
I feel like for our family, being together is how we get energized, but it's also how we relax. It's kind of like a mix of both. It's not like we only see each other when we want to relax, or we only see each other when we have a ton of energy. We just see each other.
It's a safety net.
Yeah. I think we've always been pretty consistent, but I think we're getting more consistent.
Yeah, I think just being aware of how important those relationships are.
Yeah. Do you think that's been like a positive takeaway just from like your upbringing, being social, being with other people, but also being active? Like you would go and do fun things, and you would, learn even on those fun things, like going camping. We learned so much just in how to like survive.
Oh yeah, I did learn quite a bit, and then also, for example, camping for us included the old cabin with the wood stove, and so it became a teaching moment for you kids on how to learn how to start a fire or cook on a wood stove, or that a wood stove was hot. A lot of history in that, so that makes sense. Yeah.
All right, next question. What do you anticipate in the coming years? So that's kind of vague.
Years or year?
Years,
Okay.
like plural. So you can think like 5 to 10 years ahead, and then you can think more long term.
So, Dad had the blessing of being able to retire early. He's a young retiree, and we typically think of a retired person as age 65 and above. So I feel like we have this bubble of about 12 years where we're in better health than a typical 60 to 75-year-old would be. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have a lot of family time and activity and feeling good physically. So I just anticipate lots of memory making in the next 12 to 15 years and beyond. But I think we have this extra bubble that we
Just
need to free time, not take advantage of, but just be thankful for it and make it worthwhile. So
Yeah, nice.
So traveling, to answer your question, what do you anticipate?
Yeah, well, that leads to my next question. What do you do for fun, or what would you like to do for fun?
Well, I think, like everyone, the pandemic squelched a lot of our outside activities, so I think I would like to establish a couple regular family activities. We've always had camping, or let's see, I think doing some new camping excursions or establishing some new traditions with that. So maybe camping, or maybe a trip that we do on a regular basis that we can look forward to, whether that's camping, whether that's Disneyland, perhaps a trip for Dad and I. We had talked before Dad retired about going on a trip to Europe, and that got postponed, and then we kind of revisited again and just decided to stay close to home for a while and just focus on family and doing things with family, with close activities. And I think that if we continue doing things like that, that's good. But I also think that time alone for Dad and I to kind of just keep that going is good, and will help us have some things to talk about with the family. So
Good answer.
it's kind of going on and on there. Sorry. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Was that all?
Yeah.
Okay. What challenges or issues are you facing? So this can be
This could be
anything.
long. Yeah. So challenges this last year has been kind of like a roller coaster, um, with my mom's death and then watching my dad grieve and grieving myself. Um, and we just kind of have had a roller coaster of emotions, me personally, and then as a family a little bit, but I think we have weathered that really well together. Um, and then other challenges would probably just be physical, just focusing on keeping my physical health well. So,
Nice. All right, and then this is the last of the universal questions. How do you overcome obstacles, stress, life events, etc.? And I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the cognitive section with stressors and coping mechanisms, but can you give me a kind of a
yeah.
quick answer?
So I don't have any one particular way other than the first thing I usually do is pray because faith is important to me and I believe in prayer. So that is the first thing that I do. Depending on the problem or whatever I'm trying to work through, I might talk to a mentor friend, somebody that I trust, their opinion, that has known me for a long time. Might have a family discussion about it. Referring to the Bible, maybe depending on, again, on the situation, see what the Bible says about a particular topic. Might call my dad and ask his opinion. I do that a lot, actually. Yeah, so I kind of break it down depending on the situation. Maybe I just need to go for a little walk and clear my head and process something. So I just have to categorize the importance of what decision needs to be made.
Nice. Good answer. Okay, so now we're going to jump into, I'll just call it part 2 of the interview. These are the sectional questions, and the first one we're going to do is cognitive. So there's 3 types of intelligence. There's fluid, crystallized, and analytic intelligence. Fluid is, the book definition of these, fluid is type of learning of all sorts of quick and thorough abilities such as short-term memory, abstract thought, and speed of thinking. So kind of more just kind of brain intelligence, I guess I would say. And then crystallized intelligence is accumulated learning, so thinking something crystallizes over time. Vocabulary, facts, learning that builds off of each other and increases with age and continued learning. And then analytic intelligence is abstract planning, strategy selection, focused attention, information processing, verbal and logical skills. So of those 3 categories, like, we all have a little bit of all of them. But do you feel like there's one that you have more than the other, or can you give an example of one of them? Like just an example answer might be like, do you have a skill or a set of knowledge that you've kind of excelled in throughout life?
Well, I think that for me personally, some people can read a book and understand it the first time they read it. I have to read through it about 3 times and take notes and then read it again and then have someone show me. So I'm more of an on-the-job learner. So for me, building knowledge over time, the more I do things, makes sense to me. That I learn more as I go. The longer I do something, I become better and better at it. However, I don't believe that there is any everything is not always absolute. I think that change is always happening. So for me, let's use technology as an example. When I started doing bookkeeping, it was pencil and paper. And now there's lots of programs that you can do the same thing on the computer. So I just have to be flexible and go, oh, okay, I can see how that works on this app.
Mm-hmm. I kind of laugh because I feel like you know way more about technology than I do. Like, I think I have 3 apps on my phone. Yeah, probably more like 10 or more. But not that that's a bad thing. I just laugh because you, as like considered a new learner, kind of like technology has come later in life for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've learned how to adapt to it, whereas I was born kind of into it.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty young. Like, we had laptops when we were in 6th grade for school, and that was like the newest, coolest technology. And now it's like
Mm-hmm.
old school. But even like me growing up in that, I feel like it was just normal for me, and so I didn't have to work extra hard to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, I didn't spend a ton of time
Mm-hmm.
doing technology stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say definitely crystallized for you, but also analytic intelligence sounds more complex than I think it really is, because like abstract planning and strategy selection, focused attention, all of those things like you learn with raising 4 kids. So you had to learn to be strategic and
Mm-hmm.
solve problems and to be
Mm-hmm.
quick on your feet. And so just because it wasn't like a job doesn't mean you didn't have all of the necessary skills
Sure.
to do those things.
Yeah.
So just adding to what you said, but cool. And then the next question, we kind of touched on this earlier, but stressors, and that's defined as any situation, event, experience, or other stimulus that causes a person to feel stressed. Many circumstances that seem to be stressors or stresses become stressors for some people, but not for others.
Mm-hmm.
And then the coping mechanisms that are categorized in the book, there's 4. There's avoidant coping, which is ignoring, forgetting, or hiding it. Problem-focused coping, tackling a stressful situation directly. Emotion-focused coping, changing feelings about the stressor rather than changing the stressor itself. And then religious coping, which is the process of turning to faith as a method of coping with stress.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not always cut and dry, one or the other. You can have a mix.
Mm-hmm.
Like problem-focused coping through, religious means, like going to the Bible to tackle a situation head on, or going to the Bible to change how you feel about a stressor, because maybe the stressor won't go away.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel like you lean towards one more than the other, or what would you say is like your general mix of coping mechanisms?
I would say over time I have changed my coping when I learned healthier coping mechanisms as a young adult. And this would be because I had not been taught healthy coping mechanisms. So, maybe we didn't talk about them growing up, which would have been important for me personally because I'm a talker. So, as a young adult, I had to learn how to talk through certain things, and that was hard for me. So, as a young adult, it was easier for me to just not talk and have a problem swirl around in my head. But then over time, I had to learn how to get that out of my head. So I'm a note writer. I write myself notes. I journal. Exercise when I'm feeling healthy is super helpful to just get that weighted energy out of my head. Now, as let's just say a more maturing adult, I recognize the value in faith and family. So I will talk to Dad, I will pray, and I will look in Scripture for coping. So some people would call that meditating, but yeah, I guess meditate on Scripture. So.
Yeah, awesome.
And sometimes I just like a bowl of ice cream too. So.
Yeah. Or an extra cup of coffee.
Yeah. Fancy coffee. Yeah.
Or Costco.
Or going shopping, or sometimes that looks like just going out to coffee with a friend and sitting there for 3 hours and talking about nothing. That is helpful too. Not all the time, but sometimes.
I think that's okay to do sometimes, just to give yourself time to either step out of your problem for, just a brief moment to live, and then come back and have more ability to tackle it head on.
Well, also, one thing I've learned about myself is, as a woman, sometimes I just have to talk stuff out, even though it doesn't make sense. I just have to get it all out of my head, and that comes out my mouth. And that's kind of how I think. I think out loud, and it's how I process if there's a problem or whatever. And so going somewhere outside of home, which is kind of it's where I rest, but it's also where I do my work, getting outside of the house and just having time away and verbally processing some of that stuff makes it all better. It's like, oh, that wasn't as big a deal as it felt like. So
yeah, just a change of scenery helps sometimes, I think. Awesome. All right, and then the next section. Okay. Next section, biosocial. How have you physically changed during this stage of life in comparison to the last? Are you more or less active? Do you consider yourself more or less focused on nutrition? Do you feel like you are strong and have vitality in this stage of life?
When you say the stage of life, are you comparing it to early adulthood or childhood?
Technically, I'd say, the previous stage of life is like young adults.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat something that I said earlier, and that is about age 30 to 35, you start to recognize things changing in your body that you might not necessarily have control over entirely, but you can do things that are more beneficial. So I am, you do a skincare routine, you wash your face and you try to drink enough water and do all those things. Even if you do all those things as you age, your body is still going to age and decline as much as you want to do those things. There's just a natural progression that happens. So I would say I feel pretty great right now, even though I have my own personal goals of how health would look better for me. So I am working on all of those things. But overall, I would say I feel pretty good. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. I feel like we've learned a lot together just through health journeys and health struggles too, just learning to figure out what's going on. And so we've done a lot of learning, and I think we've always been fairly healthy eaters, but I think in the last 5 to 10 years, our family has just been eating a lot more vegetables and just being more aware, because I think with being littles, there's so much going on in that realm. Quick is nice, but now we have a little bit more time to.
Well, I think what I have recognized as far as nutrition, one of the things that is beneficial is to not have your television on and limit your social media, because the marketing that comes through those avenues for poor nutrition is valid. I mean, it is legitimate. garbage.
Yeah.
And there's things that, as a young mom, I thought, oh, this is so great and so convenient, applesauce in a tube or yogurt in a tube. And now you look at it and you're like, that is junk. I'm so sorry I fed that garbage to you. So, yeah, I think we have learned together, and that's good. And we have learned the value in nutrition and good nutrition together. And that's helpful because then we can, accountability, and then it's fun too, experimenting.
And Costco.
And Costco.
But I think like our family has learned a lot in the last couple of years, but also like just comparing it to culture too, like compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago, like it used to be like the basis of your diet should be carbs because they're quick and easy, and that was definitely marketed.
And they
then,
give you energy.
and they give you energy, and then come to find out recently it's like, oh, actually you're supposed to be keto. Like it's so diet culture or whatever you want to call it, just nutrition information and knowledge has changed in and of itself, and so we have adapted a little bit with the culture, but we've never gone to the extreme of saying, okay, our whole family's going to be keto. Like I think through everything we've just learned to be more balanced,
Right.
and to be, we're knowledgeable about all the different types of diet options out there, but we've learned to just kind of stick to being balanced and figuring out what works for us, but also being just aware and conscientious about our choices.
You used the word balanced, and I think that is really a key word because in any area of your life, balance is key. If anything is tipped one way or the other out of balance, it's going to come to light eventually, and I think that would include nutrition. Eat mostly, I'm just going to say good, 80%, and then have your dessert once a week or once a month or whatever, something that you wouldn't normally eat. But if it makes you feel crummy, you're not going to choose that. So balance is good. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, last section is psychosocial. So this one I wanted to talk about, like in this section of the book it talks about personality, social behaviors, caregiving, and independence needs of your own.
Okay.
So would you say, like, do you think that your personality or like how you interact with others has changed at all since like we're 25? I mean, or if so, like in what ways? Because you always have like your streamlined personality, but do you think there's any major changes?
No major changes, but just recognition of my own personality and how to take care of myself in the midst of taking care of others. Here's an example. Instead of saying, oh yes, I can do that, oh yes, I can do that, because I'm capable of doing those 5 things, I prioritize those 5 things and say, okay, I can do that, but I need to say no to that, even though I really want to and I love you, and I realize you're still going to like me for me saying no. I have to recognize that I'm still okay if I say no to something, so that I can say yes to something that might be more important. So I think throughout my adult life, I've just had to recognize and prioritize what's important to my faith, what's important to my husband and my family, and then, after those things are covered, then maybe church activity or a job, just again that balance. So I've learned over 30 years how to take care of my emotional and physical needs first before I give everything out of my basket to everyone else. So I have to make sure that I'm strong in different areas before I start giving time and energy.
I think you've always, I didn't know you before you were 30 because I wasn't around yet. But I feel like, you've always had like a caring, nurturing personality. But I've gotten to see that because you're in the same one generation. I've seen you care for, Nana and even Papa, but also extended family, and then also care for, Brooke and her having her first grandchild. And so I think that has just been amplified in the best way. So yeah, it's fun to watch. It's a good example.
Oh, thank you, honey.
Okay, and then next part, the young adult stage of life, Erik Erikson is like one of the theorists, and he has his 8 stages of development through life. And for the young adults, it's like intimacy versus isolation. So finding community and or finding like a spouse, or you are kind of like lonely. And then for the adult generation, it's called generativity versus stagnation. So what that means is like generativity, how you're kind of growing older, and I guess in a sense how you're kind of starting to deteriorate, but at the same time you're able to give, I feel like, more than ever of yourself. So it's that versus stagnation. Are you just gonna like be stuck where you are and not grow and not give and just kind of be? So I feel like just from knowing you, you're definitely generativity. Like I think in different areas of life we might feel like, oh, I might be a little stagnant here, but I'm more generativity here. I think you and Dad definitely have generativity because we just have so much going on, but you've learned how to grow and to have purpose in every area of life. So.
And also, I just want to add to that, in that remember that hard part of life that I talked about, your 20s to your mid-30s, or 40s, you're really working hard to prepare for the future, and retirement just sounds so far off. But now, for Dad and I, here we are, and we realize all that we have accumulated and planned for, we need some of that financially we don't know how long we're going to live. But also we realize that we can't take anything with us except our faith in Jesus. And so we want to put more emphasis on that, and our family. So we want to share what we have with our family, or if there's somebody in need. So I think that looking back, that's why we work so hard. Now we're able to be generous with our time and our finances, or however that looks. And so there's, that feels good too, to be able to have that freedom to do those things.
Yeah, you guys made a lot of sacrifices to be able to retire early.
Right.
It's not like it was just handed to you.
Right.
Came after many years of hard work.
Yes, correct. Totally worth it.
Alright, and then the last part I'll go over is the big 5 personality traits, which you can remember it by like canoe or ocean. It's the same letters, just a different way to remember it. But the different ones are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So I feel like we all have a little mix of all of these, but which one would you consider yourself more than the others? Because we usually have one that sticks out way more than the others. I think I know which one I would say you are, but
can you read them to me again?
Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
I'm going to say probably a tie between openness and conscientious.
Hmm.
Would you say similar or?
Yeah, I'd say so. I was going to say conscientious.
Mhm.
Because openness is like, I feel like you're just like kind of open about everything, and like that's the person walking around in their tube top and their short shorts.
Oh.
They're just open, like whatever goes.
Yeah.
And then conscientious is like, I'm thinking about other people, so maybe I'll wear like my capris instead. Because you're talking about personality, but I'm just
Mm-hmm.
talking about them in clothing. And then extroversion is like you want to meet everybody, you want to know everybody. Being around people makes you giddy and bouncy.
That would have been my young adulthood.
Oh. And then agreeableness is like, oh, it's, whatever you guys want to do. Like, I'm happy if you're happy. And then neuroticism is just, I just think that's like the person with the dreadlocks. They're just kind of out there, a little bit crazy, wild, not quite the same wild as an extrovert, although they can go hand in hand.
Well, I like your stereotype there.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, but really, it could be anybody who is more self-focused than others focused, and so back to balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you use the acronyms for the canoe or the ocean, I pictured myself rowing in a canoe in the ocean.
Yeah.
Do you remember being up in the Puget Sound and we were canoeing in the ocean, and it was like, get me back to land. So that was great.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up our interview. Thank you.
That was fun, Courtney. Thank you.
We made it.
I hope you do these interviews more regularly because it, is focused getting to know you, and it's time together. So I like it.
Come into my office anytime. I'll send you my office hours.
Thank you, sweetheart.
I'm closed on the weekends.
Yeah. Good job.
Okay. Time for Costco.
Yes, time for Costco.